Mark Brock. Mark and his wife Sandy farm near Staffa, Ontario. They're very, very innovative producers. They've always been that way. Mark's been big in precision agriculture. He's one of the first guys that I did research plots with, one of the first guys to find sulfur deficiency in wheat. And I think you all know kind of where we're at with sulfur deficiency in wheat now. It's worse in alfalfa, so really kind of on the leading edge from that standpoint. Used to be in the feather industry, so used to be a really rich farmer. Somehow stepped out of the feather industry, now has a flock of 500 sheep. As a former sheep farmer, I can only feel sorry for him for that, but I think Sandy does most of that work. He's the current chair of the Grain Farmers of Ontario. Please welcome Mark Brock.
Thanks, Peter. It's truly a pleasure to be here today, and I like to define myself now as a peasant farmer with the sheep and not the feathers. So, and Peter's right, my wife does all the work. So I just kind of, I just show up and actually grade stuff, and I don't know if I lost my mic. Oh, you're good. Pardon me? Okay. Sorry. I like to walk and talk, so I'm going to stay down here today. Just going to see if I can get my presentation up on the screen, but you know, I guess what I'm going to cover today is just kind of some aspects from what we're seeing as an organization with the Grain Farmers of Ontario and some of those issues that we're facing. And I'm going to probably go, you know, broad, very broad, and then kind of come down to what does it mean to you on the farm. And I'm going to just hit a little bit that because there's some other really good speakers today that can add more insight on the farm side. But I'd be happy to have dialogue or answer questions anytime today that I'm around. So really going to look at social and consumer acceptance, the national perspective that, you know, what's Canada as a whole looking at, sustainability, it's kind of that new sexy word that's out there, and what does that mean, and kind of where are we with sustainability. And I think it really comes down to how do you balance economics with societal concerns, and then what does it mean on my farm. So when you get into social and consumer acceptance, you know, what does this look like? And I don't have an answer for you. And I think that's the struggle we have, is that, you know, you have these demands that are out there from consumers and all throughout GMO labeling. And, you know, that's a big thing that's going on in the US, and I know there's dialogue around Canada with GMO labeling, but, you know, consumers want this. You know, there's been pushback from us to have labels. Where does it go? You know, how do you get to that point where consumers are satisfied, you know, with the product that they're buying from us, and they feel good about it, and we can still do what we do on our farm. So I think this is going to be ever evolving, and it's just the fact that we have to ensure that we have the dialogue with these people that are buying the product. I don't think we need to be knee-jerk all the time and chase stuff that consumers are asking for, because they seem to be very whimsical at times and jump from issue to issue. You have gluten intolerance, and then you have something else, and then you have something else, and what's the new fad diet of the day? So some of those things we have to really balance out, because we can't react that quick on our farms. You know, how can we achieve this? I just think we have to ensure that we do have dialogue with consumers and understand where their concerns come from, and see how do we address those concerns and still not have it impact us on the farm. And I think it may be in the role that I'm in the dialogue that I have with a government, bureaucrats, elected officials, both provincially and federally, and just some consumer groups. You know, the question is, how much scrutiny are we under? We're under a tremendous amount of scrutiny. You know, people are looking at everything we do under a microscope. You know, I get nervous when I see a white car with Ontario on the side driving by my farm, because I'm not sure what they're looking for. And some of that scrutiny, we're under a pile of it, and I think when you see the algae blooms in the Great Lakes and Lake Erie, that just adds to this level of scrutiny. And, you know, should we be challenged on what we do? Yeah, sure, we should be challenged. But do we want to be challenged every day for normal farming practices? You know, that's the thing we have to balance off. And, you know, what happens when societal and consumer acceptance gets off track? I think a prime example is this neonic regulation that came into effect. You know, that's what happens when stuff gets sidetracked real quick, where we aren't maybe listening to some of these. And not that you want to live by special interest environmental groups, but I think you need to have that in the background noise there when we're looking at stuff. So because when we do get off track, that's what happens. And Peter made a good point, is that, you know, we want to steer the ship. We don't want to be the ones on the ship. We'll wait and let someone else steer it for us. So from a national perspective, there's actually been a lot of dialogue around this concept of social license. And it's surprising how much I've heard this term in the last year. And I think it comes from the fact that I'm involved nationally in the kind of Grains Value Roundtable, where all of industry and producer groups there, industry, government, federal government, provincial governments are all there, and they're talking about cross-cutting commodity issues, either from canola to corn. And this whole concept of social license and consumer acceptance has actually been part of that dialogue around that table. And so, to my surprise, we actually spent a half a day of a meeting bringing in speakers from you know, WWF and different NGOs like Ducks Unlimited, just kind of getting some of what they're hearing and what their concepts are about where they see agriculture and, you know, what role we play, positive or negative, on the environment. So when you start seeing government kind of pull their head up a little bit and have dialogue around social license, then you know that it's starting to resonate. And the federal, provincial, territories, the ag ministers met in PEI, Charlottetown PEI, in July, and I was there in a big roundtable that the Canadian Federation of Agriculture has before the working meetings with the ministers, and it was a whole afternoon on social license again. So the question that comes out of this is that, you know, it's not really commodity specific. It's not just corn and soybeans and neonics. It's animal welfare and livestock. It's everything. It's the whole gamut. It's all commodities that we produce as farmers. So the question really that was asked at this table with federal government, provincial government, industry, producers was, you know, how do we tell our story? And, you know, as chairman of Grain Farmers of Ontario, I can go tell a consumer group that we're doing things fine, and I'm full of crap, because I'm from a group. But if I'm Mark Brock with my farmer hat on, talking to a couple consumers at a grocery store, I'm the most credible guy around. So how do we lose that? And I think that's kind of the question that we ask is, how am I credible as an individual, but as an organization we're not? So that we got to balance and figure that one out a little bit. So I think there's a lot of dialogue around how we tell our story. And this what gets scary is when government says, well, what's our role to play in this? And I'm not sure government's a credible voice either in terms of telling consumers that farmers are doing it right. So, you know, is there ways that they can help us in funding and different things? So I think we have to balance out whatever all our roles are to play in this. So this kind of trips me into this sustainability, and, you know, that's a dialogue that's happened nationally as well, for something I'm involved in, and you know, everyone's got a definition for sustainability. I can't tell you what it is. You know, from our view, it's three pillars. It's environment, economics, and social. That's kind of Grain Farmers of Ontario's view on it, and all of them have to work in conjunction with each other. They can't be heavily weighted either way. But, you know, I think Walmart's have defined it. We've defined it. You know, Unilever's defined it. So it's kind of this tough one because, you know, the definition is tailored to how you want it to be. And, you know, I don't think sustainability will give us consumer or customer acceptance, but I think it plays a significant role in that. So, you know, and I'll show a slide coming up, but I think there's sustainability plans out there that lead to the conversation that makes consumers more, you know, less concerned about what we're doing on the farm because we have sustainability programs. And that's what's really cool about the initiative that's going on here is that whole concept of how do we tell our story, how do we do it better, so on and so forth. So from Grain Farmers of Ontario, we kind of looked at sustainability and we got on board early because we wanted to be steering the ship, not riding the ship. So we try to get involved we've done a pilot program with a roundtable for our TRS. It's a sustainability program for soybeans, and it's been good uptake going into the EU. And then there's some initiatives on the field print calculator, which is another metrics version of, you know, almost kind of a mathematical equation of how sustainable is your farm based on questions. And then we're involved, and I actually co-chair the National Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Crops. So at this thing here is we're trying to help industry and consumer groups work on sustainability. And just to give you an idea, here's some of the sustainability programs that are out there. You know, and that's just a few. I think there's like over 150 sustainability programs out there. And it's marketing. A lot of them aren't that different from each other, but that's something we have to keep in the back of mind as producers as well, is that as we go to export products, especially into the EU, we're going to have to, you know, look around and probably fall into one of these categories eventually of a sustainability program. And, you know, work that's going to happen here with this program, I think, will help us feed into those sustainability programs, and we can address a lot of those needs. But it really comes down to a balancing act. You know, and I don't have an answer for that first question, where how do you balance agronomics and economics with societal demands? You know, I think a prime example is this new Class 12 neonic regulation that's out there. You have special interest groups that were concerned about the impact the pesticide was having on the environment, and specifically the pollinators. And from, you know, November of last year to July 1st, we went through a discussion paper, a draft regulation, and now we have a regulation in place. That's freaking fast, and it's scary. And it's scary how fast government can move when they want to move. So that's some of the concern that I have. And I don't think we hit a balancing act there. You know, I think there was some stuff that we could have done that would have achieved everyone's goals. I think our goals as producers and government's goals of kind of meeting societal demands out there of the voters. But this expedient timeline didn't allow for that. So, you know, this is kind of where it fails, this balancing act. So, you know, I think we have to work on this balancing act as we look at some of the other ones. You know, the Great Lake Water Quality Act, specifically to the algae bloom in Lake Erie. You have climate change. You know, the two are tied. I had a discussion with Ken Nixon on the way down where, you know, no-till and soluble phosphorus is getting demonized for polluting the Great Lakes. Yet we have a climate change bill that's going to, or act that's going to come through saying that we need to sequester carbon. How else do you do that than no-till or strip-till? Like, they're counterintuitive policies, and that's what we're trying to fight. So I don't know how we get back to that balancing act, but that's something we have to try to achieve. You know, so what does this mean on my farm? And I'm going to put my farmer hat on, and you can't see it very well, probably with the pictures. But it's going to be less of that. You know, I plow. I know. The reason I plow is because we had a foot of snow and we had to get our crop off, and we made a bit of a mess. But I'm balancing the value of the crop in the field, and how else do I do it? And I have to do something to repair it. You know, I'm not saying it's a perfect system, but still plow. But disc gripper, you know, field cultivator, my fertilizer spreader. You know, I don't think we'll be pounding out 300 or 400 pounds of fertilizer all at once. Like I looked at 20-inch rows. We were in 20-inch rows for 4 years. We moved back to 30s this year because we were dumping out all our nitrogen ahead of time because it was difficult to side dress and feed that 20-inch row corn crop. And I'm seeing some of this stuff that's happening on a bigger level, and I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to have to start spoon feeding this crop a little bit better. And so we switched and went back to 30-inch corn so we can side dress nitrogen, because I'd love to think we can keep doing what we're always doing, but we're going to be forced to change. How much that change is going to be, I don't know, and I think we have to try to influence that as much as possible. But, you know, some of those days are over, and I think you'll see more of this. Cover crops. You know, I don't think the cover crops are going to answer everything. And I don't think they're going to retain as much nutrients as we think they are. Are they good for the soil? Absolutely. I think that's where we start. They're good for the soil. So we're doing that on our farm. We've been doing it for 5 years. This year, part of the move that we did to 30-inch corn was to go to strip till. So we experimented, and you can't see the pitch very well, but we actually planted the strips this spring and are very happy with that transition. Much to Peter's chagrin, well, maybe not as much anymore. That was a failed wheat crop that you can't see, that I actually just no-tilled soys into the standing wheat. So, there's guys talking about planting green, I don't know. I'm not there yet. But, there's going to be some of this stuff. And then that last picture there is just side dressing. I think we're going to get forced to start splitting up some of these nitrogen applications. So what is the end goal? I think ultimately the end goal is we got to try to balance what consumers want with what's practical to us on the farm. Is that an easy task? Absolutely not. But ultimately, we can't have winners and losers. I think I look at the neonate reg, and I think there's winners and losers out of that regulation. I don't think we want that as we move forward. We have to do that better. I'm not sure how we do that better, but we have to do it better. We've got to make sure that producers have the necessary tools to adapt. So, from our standpoint, Grain Farmers Ontario, we want to make sure we have research projects that help farmers adapt or answer some of those questions we have. So we look at that. And as an organization, we have to ensure that we're proactive and not reactive. So, final slide. The only thing that's predictable is unpredictability. We could have the best intentions of the world, and we always do. But here is an example where it's trying to harvest corn and got a foot of snow. What do I do? Last year we had 2 4-inch rain events. I can have the best laid plans and they still get blown down. But that's what we have to live in. And I think society doesn't understand that aspect of it. That's what we have to educate them on a little bit more, is that we live within a dynamic system. It's really hard to do some of that stuff. But I think we're innovators, we're adapters, and we'll figure it out. But anyways, that's kind of my perspective, so thanks for your time.
Cool, thanks, Mark. So first off, don't walk away yet, Mark. There might be a question or two.
Sure.
First off, Jan, was that your cell phone that rang? $50 donation to 4-H Ontario. If your cell phone rings, it's a $50 donation to 4-H Ontario. Everybody has vibrate or silent. Get your cell phones out, get them turned off. Okay, $50, Sean. Questions for Mark? We have time for about 2 questions. Yep.
Mark, can you explain social license again?
Social license, and I don't like that term at all, because it's kind of that idea that society has given you the right to do what you do, right? And I don't think, when you talk about social license, I don't want the idea of having to go out and get a piece of paper that says I'm approved by the consumer to do what I do. I think it's more the concept that I would like to call it consumer acceptance, or societal acceptance. It's probably a term I like better, because when you talk about license, I think of a piece of paper. I sooner talk broadly and say, society is comfortable with what we're doing. So I think that's the concept of it. I just don't like the term.
And you're hearing that from government? Or?
Yeah. So, federally they talk social license, provincially they talk social contract. Contract makes me more nervous, because I think of that 17-page document with a fine grade. But it's that consumer acceptance.
Yeah, so Phil, I think for everybody, what Mark points out is that the mindset has to change. So we all have these bumper stickers that say, if you ate today, thank a farmer. And I think Dave McEachran phrased it best, if you farmed today, thank a consumer. So it's a change in mindset, this whole social license. We have to get back. It used to be that farmers were accepted. We were good guys. We rated above doctors, for crying out loud. They have great trust in us. That trust is just disappearing way faster than we want it to. So whatever you call it, Phil, whether it's social license or social contract, We need to change that mindset, and we need to start showing the consumer that we are doing the right thing, and I think that's really where we're at. So thank you very much,
Yep.
Mark, and we'll carry on.
Thanks.